Well, young lives and families forever changed after today. Take a listen to one 10-year-old who witnessed this horrific shooting.
The first one, I was like, what is that? I thought it was just something. Then when I heard it again, I just ran under the pew. And then I covered my head. My friend Victor, saved me, though, because he laid on top of me, but he got hit. He's really brave, and I hope he's good in the hospital.
We're expecting an update, by the way, from city officials in just a few minutes now, Josh, because we're getting more information, aren't we, about the culprit.
That's right, and everything we're learning is pointing to a premeditated, well-planned act of just horrific violence here. The police chief in his update, an additional piece of information he told us was that the suspect had actually brought with him wooden boards that were used to barricade some of the exit doors, presumably to try to keep those children and teachers inside as he fired upon them from outside the door. Just a truly, truly horrific set of details that we're learning. We're also told that the suspect had 3 weapons at the time, a very high-powered rifle, as well as a shotgun and a smaller pistol on their person whenever this actually occurred. Now, the individual has been identified. Authorities are working now to try to determine a possible motive. Of course, whatever they uncover, this will never really make sense to any rational person, why someone would do something like this. But because a sad reality in the U.S. is back to school means more back-to-school shootings. The FBI and other law enforcement agencies study these various acts of violence in order to try to understand key commonalities. One major theme that we're hearing from law enforcement experts is that so often these shooters will exhibit warning signs well in advance of actually conducting an act of violence. So a major question, Max, for law enforcement at this hour: did anyone in the shooter's orbit know what was about to happen or whether this person had been suffering from any type of issues?
As you say, we keep hearing similar stories, don't we? Always horrific. We heard from one of the young children describe how they actually rehearsed for these sorts of events, but within the school, not within the church. And that really brings to light the sort of environment some of these kids are living in.
That's right. I mean, children here in the United States are constantly having to do drills, some of them quite lifelike, what to do if there's a warning, what to do if you hear the sound of gunshots. This is now something that is part of training for teachers as well in this country, constantly trying to, repetition, train. What would we do if this actually occurs? Because this is something that we see so often in this country, just multiple mass shootings. We're told from the local the local hospital there that was receiving these patients, they just had a separate mass casualty event happen within the last 24 hours. And so this is sadly something that police are familiar with, first responders familiar with, and sadly children as well.
Josh Campbell, thank you for that update. U.S. Senator for Minnesota Amy Klobuchar told our Dana Bash her former employee's daughter was at the Annunciation Catholic School's Mass and saw some of her best friends get shot, one in the neck, one in the stomach. Klobuchar said the daughter then had to tell the father of one of her friends what happened.
When you see these innocent kids praying in a church and they get gunned down by a madman, you have to step back and think, what can we do better? What can we do better with background checks or with assault weapons, which may not have played into this situation? But every situation is different, and there are a number of things we can do that would not hurt law-abiding gun owners, of which there are so many in my state and in our country.
Amy Klobuchar speaking. Joining us now, Axel Henry, who serves as the St. Paul Police Chief. St. Paul is the twin city of Minneapolis. St. Paul Police Chief Axel Henry, thank you so much for joining us here today. You've obviously got very close contacts with many of the people involved here. Just describe the atmosphere today.
Well, anytime a situation happens like this, the entire law enforcement community is going to come together pretty quickly. I was texting and then speaking directly with Chief O'Hara very early this morning, offering our support in any manner that it would be needed. Obviously, in the early points of the investigation, we were unclear about how big this was, how many people were potentially involved. as well as the types of threats that were out there, whether it would be explosives or firearms or any other things. And so we've offered our resources. We come together. We actually have 2 employees that I know of so far who have relatives that were in the school. One of I know that was also shot. And so these things hit us all very close to home, and we take them extremely seriously.
Just didn't seem preventable, did it? There's no suggestion that this was going to happen. It was in a church where obviously people usually feel safe. What are your thoughts on preventing events like this?
Well, I think, preparation is the key. We have great relationships here in St. Paul with the St. Paul public school system, as well as our both, the public and parochial schools. Nowadays, most cities have a whole bunch of different style schools. Your traditional just public school setting is not the only form that they have. And so have those conversations, have those relationships. Our SWAT team goes out to the different schools and different businesses, for that matter, and scouts out those locations and tells you if you've got something that is particularly threatening to you, whether someone could barricade a door against you, or if there are conditions or situations inside of your building that make you safer, or things that you can do for prevention. And we also want to make sure law enforcement, the first time they're responding to your location on a serious event like this, isn't the first time that we've been there. We know the layout, we're familiar with it, because really what we're talking about here is threats to any collection point where people gather in mass. That's where people who want to do harm can have the most effective strikes against the public. And so we want to make sure that we're taking those into account, and we're having those relationships and partnerships in advance so we can help fortify those, and prevention is really the key.
But then prevention, how far do you take it? How protected do you live your life? Barricade everything up, or accept that events can happen and have some freedom with your life? I mean, it's a really tough balancing act, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think one of the things we should all be considering as a country, and I know this is a controversial point, but, a lot of these folks, we want to prevent the next one, are craving the notoriety that comes with it. This is an unbelievably cowardly and selfish act. And I can tell you that you will never hear me speak this person's name once they're identified. They want the notoriety. We, I think, as a country, have to decide that we are not going to give them the attention. There's a craving out there to understand what happened. But most of this is basically beyond understanding. And I think that the clinicians and the researchers and law enforcement need to really study how that happened so they can prevent it in the future. But we as a community have to stop saying, we're not going to speak your name. We're not going to give you an advertisement for your actions so that you can live on with your notoriety.
Do you have an issue with the media there as well then?
Well, I understand the media has a job to do. I can appreciate that. But I think we can all decide what we want to do as a community and as a society. The name is going to get out there. I don't think that's unavoidable. But I do think that we need to be very precise about how we treat these issues, because, again, we don't want to spur on the next person to do something like this. And again, the credit that gets given out for this and the notoriety that comes with it is something that we know that folks that are suffering from the things they suffer from that would make them do this in the first place, that is one of the things that they look for.
St. Paul Police Chief Axel Henry, our thoughts with everyone in that region. Thank you so much for joining us today. The White House says President Donald Trump spoke by phone earlier with Minnesota's Governor Tim Walz about the shooting. In an earlier online post, Mr. Trump said he'd been briefed on the matter and administration officials will continue to monitor any developments. CNN's Kevin Liptak is here with more from the White House. I mean, it's going to move into that debate, isn't it, about gun control and the use of guns and how many guns are around?
Yeah, I think that's probably an accurate prediction. And you've already heard from Democrats like Amy Klobuchar, the senator from Minnesota, say that this is a conversation that needs to start immediately. But I think, just a reality check here. It's not a conversation that will be led from here at the White House. It's not a conversation that will go anywhere in the Republican-led House or in the Republican-led Senate. And this is a place that we have been so many times in the United States where after a tragedy like like this, politicians sort of make noises about trying to restrict access by these very troubled individuals to the weapons that are used to create this kind of horrific tragedy. And then that conversation just sort of dissolves into the ether and everyone just moves on. You know, that's how this has gone many times before, and it's going to probably go that way again, but that isn't necessarily going to stop, you know, individuals from talking about sending out their thoughts and prayers for the victims. You saw President Trump do that, say that, please join me in praying for everyone involved. You had the Vice President, J.D. Vance himself, a practicing Catholic and the father of 2 young kids, saying that all of us were praying for the victims at the White House. Pam Bondi, who was here at the White House, she's the U.S. Attorney General, saying that her prayers were with everyone involved in this tragedy. That does stand in quite stark contrast to the mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, who was out earlier today saying, don't just say this is about thoughts and prayers right now. These kids were literally praying. And so you already start to see kind of the contrast there in how American officials are responding to this. We did see President Trump sign a proclamation lowering the American flag to half staff, and you see that there at the top of the White House, and we've seen the 2 sort of giant flags that the president put in place on the north and south lawns. Those have been lowered as well for the first time since he put those into place. And so symbolic signs of how the White House and how President Trump are responding. But Max, you know, everyone who has covered this for years and years knows where this debate is headed, and it's headed nowhere. Gun control is just not an issue that's politically salvageable in the United States, at least at the current moment. That is just the reality. And I think it probably needs to be said that, you know, after all of these shootings, almost no laws have been put in place to restrict the kinds of weapons that these individuals have access to, and that is probably how this is going to go this time as well.
Kevin Liptak, thank you so much. We were showing images there where Kevin is of the White House, the flag being shown at half-staff. So obviously the whole nation feeling really reflecting how the whole nation is feeling today. But as Kevin says, you know, where it goes from here, where the debate and the change comes from here,